This is your market update for Monday, March 2nd. All right, we're going to get started with the S&P Cash Daily. Now, with the 513 moving back up to the upside yesterday and price being back above the 50, I thought we might get some follow through to the upside, but no such luck. Instead, what we saw was a continued pullback from this last decision, which was what? Time and price. We had timing for a high, the 23rd through the 25th, and we had price resistance, at least in the S&P cash. Okay. Now, as far as next decisions on this chart, I really don't have that much except, just the 618 retracement of that prior swing. And of course, most of the work I'm doing on the futures contract. So let's take a look at that next. I don't have any new timing for you yet. I mean, we've only made this turn, 2 days ago. So I'm not trying to force, the daily timing to try and pick the next low. We might need to use intraday timing to look at that. And I know that the girls gave you that today. Now, as far as the March contract, I didn't see the exact same type of resistance on the March contract, but we did have, the timing kick in for the pullback. And now, as far as the next decision, I do have a clear one here. So we do have the 786 retracement, the prior low to high, and then we also have a 100% projection. Honestly, I'm not sure which swing it came from. It may have been, a little bit more over on the left-hand side of the chart, but 68.32 to 68.39 is a key decision. Underneath that, I do have another symmetrical projection at 68.05, but also notice one thing here, which gets us back to, well, we're vulnerable to more on the downside again because we're back below the 50 simple, and the 513 crossed back to the downside. So that's not, a happy thing for the bulls, but this is your next decision. Okay. Now let's get rid of those lines and then take a look at the 120-minute chart. Now, as far as the 120-minute chart, you can see that this did cross back to the downside. And we do have resistance right here, right now, already. So, yes, we did see a nice bounce that was not, it looks like a perfect hit, but 68.40 was the top end of the zone I was looking at, and 68.41.5 is the actual low. That's absolutely close enough. But here's your next decision. Take it from one decision to the next, because we don't know if it's going to continue to rally from that low or if we're going to fail here. We're at a place where we do have to watch for the possible failure. Why? Because we have a big ass cluster, 68.93.75 to 69.01.75. It includes two symmetry price projections, 1272 at 786, it looks like a 382 at 618, and so on. And do not be surprised because of the daily averages crossing back down, at least those two major ones. And also we did have the moving average crossover right here. Okay, so again, take it from one decision to the next. Now, if we can push through the same resistance, then you can look for maybe even a test of the next higher decisions on the way up. But watch this as a decision for sure. I'll have that stuff up on Sunday for those of you that actually look at the night charts. I think there's maybe 8 to 10 of you that consistently watch them, but it's something that you can take a peek at if you want. We do put in the invitation, on the site at the end of, or before we do them. So let's get rid of these lines. All right, let's move on to the next. As far as NASDAQ. So, same thing in NASDAQ. We had the 23rd through the 25th. Let's see. And I also had run the histogram for you. Okay, so the high was made on the 25th, directly within that window. It's only 2 days later. Am I going to try and use these cycles to call the next low? No, I'm not. I would say that this is a time where we go down to the 120-minute chart and see, because you can see these smaller swings internally there, and you can see if there's some timing there. But I'm not going to try and give you timing every 2 days. That's just insane, okay? It's just too much here. Actually, let me just go and replace what I just did here. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to, talk about new timing yet on this chart, but we do, have a pivotal high in place. And let's see, we're below the 50 and the 513. Looks like they're right on top of each other. Well, it looks like the 5 is below it by like three pennies or something like that. So anyway, that, and then how about, let's look at the NASDAQ daily. Now, this is a different story, and you know, we did have time and price here, because you remember we had the timing for a possible high, and we had price resistance there. Now I want you to watch this pullback. We don't have the 50 simple moving average on the side of the bulls, and we don't have the 513 on the side of the bulls either. Yet this is a setup, okay? I would wait for a trigger. Now, just because you don't have the averages on the side that I prefer doesn't mean that it's a setup that, you know, you shouldn't take. Because for some of you, this might be your bread and butter when you come to a symmetry decision and you get a trigger on a 1 minute or a 5 minute chart, because the potential is healthy even if we just get a corrective move. So let's watch this 247.79 area, 247.19 area. So that's kind of lumped together, but you know, a little bit far apart price wise. But this general area is going to be an interesting decision. So far we are holding above this symmetry. And again, remember that swings tend to be similar to other swings on the same chart. So I've gone to swings all the way back here on the left-hand side of the chart to come up with some new support for over here, because they do tend to be similar to other swings. Underneath that, we have 246.37 to 246.72. That would be another area to watch. This one I need a label for you because I'm sure you can't see it. 245.44. So let's do 245.44 to, looks like 245.67 to 67. Okay, that would be another cluster. That's actually 3 symmetry projections right there. And then of course there's, you know, there are other levels that you can look at. But let's keep an eye on this area, you know, for possible resumption of the rally, even though, yeah, it is not a royal setup by any means. But symmetry is always worth watching, right? Then we have the 120-minute chart. Now with the 120-minute chart here, I do have some overhead resistance that you definitely want to look at. Like this is one area here, 251.27, I think to 38. Yeah, because we have a 1618 extension, a 50% retracement, and a symmetrical projection that was projected from this low to high, from that low. Okay, so that's an important decision. Also, anything else that either overlaps symmetry or a 618 retracement, I typically consider an important decision, because, you know, a single level like a 382 or 50% doesn't get me excited, but a single 618 or 1618 does, you know, because they are some of the more important ratios. So anyway, we do have to watch, again, for possible failures next week, but we do have decisions for you on both sides. Now, we did have, looks like a low put in on top of some symmetry support here into the 120-minute timing. But hey, you might just get a little bit of a correction and then it rolls over again. I mean, you have to be, you know, I mean, you have to know what your risk is and you have to know what your potential targets are. But you also have to remember that if it doesn't, you know, go all the way, or it can't get through one of these important resistance decisions on the way up, please ratchet up those stops, okay? Because not all of these setups are going to get to targets, and you don't want to give back if you sat through, you know, a nice little move in your favor. You know, you don't want to give it back. As far as IWM, this is another one where I thought we might be able to push through this resistance and then start heading towards some of these higher targets. No such luck at the moment. We are holding the general area of the 786 retracement back to this last low. So I'm going to look at this last low still as key and pivotal. So if we can maybe start to see a shift on a lower time frame chart, and I think there are a lot of people that get confused about triggers. You don't take the trigger for a daily setup from the daily chart. you always have to go down to a lower time frame chart because you want the trade to trigger as close as possible to where your definition of risk is. So for example, I mean, and this is not an official setup, okay, it's just a 786. But for example, you know, you can go down to, let's say it was a cluster. You can go down to a 1 minute chart and look for an 834 EMA crossover with a 1 minute chart or a 5 minute chart, okay, or something like that. You have to kind of test it for yourself, see what you're comfortable with as far as risk. And well, if we can continue to hold above this original support and the market can start shifting gears again, then I'll have some higher hopes for higher prices. But right now, you know, today's price action did not help that case at all. So here, Dow Diamonds. Okay, now I wish this was more perfect, you know, like maybe you would have gotten in the middle of this zone, 498.37 to 499.11. But it did get up to 498.21, which was just below that 37 area. I hope some of you used it, but I know that it was a spike up into this resistance, and I believe it was near the beginning of the session. I could be wrong, but yeah, I'm not sure. But we did get a really healthy failure there, and one of the reasons why we were watching for the possibility of the failure is because of the 513 EMA combo. On the daily chart, if the 513 is bearish, you know, I have to know that the market is vulnerable to more on the downside. Okay, now if we had crossed back up, then it was going to be like, well, you know, this should really hold and we should head towards those higher targets, but no such luck there. Now we do have, I'm going to give you these as two standout areas of support. I mean, they're kind of wide. We could always break them down into smaller zones, but this 485.08 to 486.76, kind of a wider zone in the diamonds as far as support. Or you could say, well, this is one decision, and then this is another decision, 485.92 versus 486.17. And you can break this one up into, all right, this is 485.08, and then I had included all of that, but this would be by itself 485.08 to 485.31. So again, it depends on how you want to look at it, but 483.59 to 484.14 is another area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like 8. Looks like 8 price relationships there. Okay, now does that guarantee that it's going to put in a low, then that's the best trade to look at? No, and I'll tell you why, because the 513 is in a sell mode and you're going to be below the 50. So yes, it will still be a buy setup, but I'm going to consider it a counter trend buy setup. And for anybody who's new, you might want to leave the counter trend stuff alone and just focus on the trend stuff, you know, especially like the Royal setups. Now I do have that. I'm not 100% sure that definition is on the website, but it is on that sheet of paper that I usually give out. But anyway, we are bouncing off of this support, so I need to give you resistance. This would be a trend sell, 493.76 to 494.90. And that's only if, let's say we hold above here, and if we trade up into this area and we can't get through it. What do? Go down to your lower time frame chart, whether it's going to be a 1 minute or a 5 minute or something like that, and look for a trigger. If you get the trigger, you know, I would look at a short if I got the trigger, and then I would have my stop, you know, above here. And a lot of people that I know in here are using options. That might be a, you know, good way to use this work if you have not ever considered that before. All right, now let's also look at Bitcoin. You know, the weekly chart is, you know, it's not bullish. It's lower lows and lower highs. Price is below the 50, and the 5 and 13 is in a sell mode, though we are above the 200. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We're above this on a weekly chart. Now, again, does that guarantee that we're going to start to see a beautiful rally off of this area? No, but it is something to pay attention to. And then here's the daily chart. Now, you know that this was a royal sell setup. Okay, I know a lot of people are forever bulls in Bitcoin, but, you know, or buy and hold, whatever you want to, hodlers or whatever the hell it is. Here, you know, I just have to look at what I look at with every other chart. You know, when we were getting a little corrective rally and people getting excited. Oh, we put in a low. I saw that we're below the 200, below the 50. 5 and 13 crossed to the downside there. It has not crossed back to the upside yet. So I cannot get excited about the buy side in Bitcoin just yet. In the short term, was there something to look at? Yes, because we had a short-term break of the symmetry. We did get a little bit of a rally, and then it failed again. So Bitcoin is not looking good technically yet. We do have some decisions, though. And again, I don't know if the counter trend decisions will hold or not, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. So 64.27 to 57. And then this was, where we bounced off of before, which was a 786 and a 1618. But if we break this, I say we're more likely to extend to the downside towards 60.46 and 57.75, which would be the next targets. And then do not forget that the target off of this original sell setup right here is the 1272 at 56.54. Okay, but like I said, we don't know. We could have just gone here, and and I mean it still could happen. And if we hold that, we still could start pushing through resistance, and then we have a shift in pattern, and then it starts looking again. But we're not there yet. Okay. All right, let's move on to our other charts. So then we have, boy, this is a long video. Apple. Okay, Apple does not look as good as it did. Why? Because we dropped below the 50 simple moving average. We went below the symmetry of, this prior swing. So, when something declines for more than the prior decline, that's an indication that, well, you probably get at least a deeper downside decline, if not something more. So I'm not going to tell you that this is a great setup here, because it's not. It's not actually an official setup. There's a 618 and 786. Could you trade against it? Yeah, if you get a signal. But this would be a setup. But, again, it doesn't, to me, pattern-wise or whatever, it just doesn't look right, but it is a decision. Okay, so those are areas of support below the market just in case we do see lower prices. And like I said, we have setups like this back here, which would give us a potential target there. But just because I draw in the target doesn't mean that the market's going to obey, right? It's still a possibility because we're still above this low. Maybe we do this and this and this and eventually get there. But you can't make that assumption. So if you get involved in a trade and it does start to, move in your favor, good idea to trail up those stops, or, the other way, trail them down if you're in a short. All right, let's take a look at, oh yeah, and also note that, here's where on the 30-minute chart, Apple had the crossover back to the downside. For some people, they're using the crossover the other way as their exit point. Okay, because it's a sell trigger after, you saw a buy trigger back here and over here. As far as Amazon is concerned. Yeah, so my weekly support just fell a little bit short of that. I really, honestly, wish it would have gotten there. It would have been a great example for, for the expos and all that good stuff. But, also, I got to use examples of real life when it doesn't quite, meet the zone. So we do have a lot of support underneath the market in Amazon on the weekly chart. Just because there's a lot there, like, 5 or 6, 7 levels, doesn't guarantee that it's going to hold, but it does guarantee that it's an important decision. Now, so far, you can see that we did have support on the daily chart. We did have a counter trend buy decision. If you remember a while back, I gave you timing for a bounce back here. And we are getting a counter trend bounce. This started as a counter trend trade. Why was it counter trend? We're below the 50. We're below the 200, and the 5 and 13 that crossed to the downside over there still hasn't crossed back to the upside yet. Okay, so right now, I'm still considering this counter trend. I'm going to watch the timing that we have right in here or early next week for a possible failure. And if it just happens to match up with some of my price resistance and holds, and then triggers on a lower time frame chart, then I'm going to look at a short. Okay. Now, for those who do want to look at the buy side, because you might be looking at different time frames and all that, I did run you some new support, but I don't have anything great here on the daily chart. Though I believe I did show you a couple of things on the 30-minute chart, and the girls always have this chart up during the day. So, you know, we had the other day where that beautiful symmetry held. We never met the target, the full target off of that, though, because that target comes in up here. But we did see a nice rally from here to here. Okay, so, you know, trail it up as you go. That was 848. And now that we've pulled back into support again. It has crossed back to the upside. And my next upside targets include the original target. So there's a 1272 this swing that just happens to overlap 1272 that swing. So that is a target of 213.29 to 36. Okay. Google. All right, so I told you that I had a little bit of a zigzag, two-step pattern here. So here's the zigzag. Now, typically what I look for is for this swing to be similar or equal to the other swing, which it would be if it was a little bit lower. I also look for a retracement to overlap of one of these prior swings, and there is a retracement at 786 that we're overlapping. And then I also look for the extension of the swing inside the zigzag, either the 1272 or 1618, to overlap these areas. Okay, which, you know, so this is the cleaner setup, 3005 to 30123. But I told you if you want, you could also include this in the zone, which means 3005 to 30383 is pretty much it. And let's just see. So did we have a buy trigger there? It looks like this one is trying across, but my guess is that, like, for example, a 15-minute chart would have triggered. So for those of you that are okay with what I consider a counter trend trade, if you use the aggressive swing trade trigger, you could be long Google. And if you are, target 1 is 324.19, target 2 is 330.13. Okay, but it is an uphill battle because, you know, 513 is still bearish and you're still below the 50. As far as what else do I have here? I've got Nvidia. So Nvidia totally blew through those next areas of support that I was watching. So I had to, you know, go back to the left-hand side of the chart and find a few more projections to run and all that good stuff. And I have found some. But here's the thing. I've got the two dates that were, you know, the 26th, 27th as timing, plus or minus a day, for a possible low to be put in. And most people like this chart. But what we don't like about it at the moment is 513 cross to the downside, and you're below the 50. You are above the 200. So there's mixed parameters, which basically means there's a case for both sides. I mean, this was a counter trend decision when we got up into this resistance because the market was straight up into it. But yet it ended up holding right before earnings, right? All right, so besides this, somebody did ask me on the site about timing histogram. And, you know, for this one, and I was like, well, 0, 1, 2, I'm only 2 bars down. So what I did was I went 3 bars forward and then ran the histogram. So besides this timing, this is outright cycles that are done with trading days. It doesn't include, it's only the 5 days or the 4 days that it trades during any week, right? But now we have the histogram, which does include the weekends in the calculation. So typically they are slightly different than what I give you with the outright cycles. I still believe that the outright cycles are a bit more accurate, but I really like the visuals of these histograms. You know, it's kind of nice. So our decisions, I mean, I've broken this up, but you can kind of consider this whole area one decision. 174.15 to 17 is the smaller zone within 174.15 to 176.72 as a decision. Underneath that, 171.18. I think I might even have 2 projections in here. It kind of looks like there's a little overlap. Then this is just an extension by itself. It still could, you know, turn the market a little bit, but it's not an official setup. And then, of course, even lower support is down at this 164.35 that just happens to now overlap a 1272 of this full low to high swing. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you I know which, if any, of these areas are going to hold, but I am going to tell you to watch these areas and watch this timing and then look for your trigger. If you don't get a trigger, leave it alone, because guess what? We had not gotten a trigger. So, you know, when somebody's like, oh yeah, look, you know, that's a really good support, I'm going to buy it here. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's, you know, bend over. So here you can see that, you know, we had the moving average crossover at the downside. It has not crossed back to the upside. It has not crossed back to the upside on the 30 or the 15. So do I have a reason to be long Nvidia again yet? No, I don't. Okay, so like I said, be patient, see if it matches up, but still remember this will be considered counter trend because of where we're at with the averages. Yeah, I haven't looked at this one in a while. Yeah, we'll look at that next week. Anyway, back to Tesla. Still love this as a decision, which means it's an important decision. It doesn't mean that it's definitely going to hold. I mean, it did hold on the first test of it. But the 378.53 to 386.02 area, I still want you to watch via the weekly chart. Via the daily chart, oh, this is going to be one of my longest videos. On the daily chart, again, we had noticed the 513. This is why I like to have the 513 on my side with any of the trades. Okay, I mean, obviously that's a short-term counter trend decision. You know, maybe it doesn't have to be, but for the most part, for swing trade entry, I'd like to be on the side of the 513. 513 crossed to the downside over here. Do you see it crossing back to the upside yet? No. Tried, still hasn't done it. Okay, now we could retest the old support. We could hold this symmetry support of this prior high to low, 397.48. That is a setup by itself, but it is a counter trend setup. And in this case with Tesla, we do have mixed parameters. We're above the 200, yet the 513 is bearish, and we're also below the 50. So for me personally, I still have to favor the sell side because of these. Okay, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to give you your support decisions if you do want to take the counter trend trades. Now, I also ran the timing from this last high for the next possible low. Okay, and that stands out with March 3rd through the 5th. So pretty much early next week. Maybe I'll just throw a couple things up here so this reminds me to finish maybe outright timing next week. See if there's anything that's going to match up. Yeah, this will match up with March 3rd. This one, let's see if this matches up with anything. March 5th. Okay. All right. So anyway, yeah, we have March 3rd, March 5th so far. So anyway, that's something to look at. Like, let's say we have a smash down into really solid support, even though it's counter trend. Like I said, if you want to look at it for, you know, day trade or something like that, go for it. And who am I to say that you can't counter trend trade? I'm just saying for newbies, you know, you want to have a lot of experience making money trading on the trend side of the market before you start messing with anything else. Oh, there's another date on the 4th. Okay, so anyway, I'll complete this on Monday. Okay, but that's something to watch. You know, I'm still going to watch for a possible low to develop. But, you know, you're only going to get your first signals or shifts and patterns on the lower time frame charts first. Doesn't look good technically yet on the daily. All right, and then we have, I love that, you know, gold is chugging away. This is one of the ones where you'll notice that since all the averages have been on the same side, you know, on the buy side, we're supporting the bulls. I've only been talking about the buy side for you. Okay, here is resistance that I would like you to trail up stops on long positions. It's not, that's more important than saying, oh, look, this is a big old cluster, I'm going to look at getting short gold. Because then you're going to be getting short gold, you know, counter trend with all the averages on the side of the bulls. I'm not saying that that can't work. It can. but it's not something that I would focus on personally. Okay. Also, maybe remind me to redo timing here in the gold, but typically it looks like we've got the third through the sixth. Let me add that right now. Okay, so we'll keep those, third through the sixth. Okay, we'll keep those dates in mind there. And again, if you want to use this for a short-term short, and we go up into this very big cluster and all of a sudden you get a sell on a 1 minute chart, you still might get a really nice scalp off of it. But like I said, you have to decide what kind of trader you are, how you want to use this work, whether you're trend trading only, where you put the bigger size on your trend trades, and maybe you do small size if you see a counter trend setup that you like. All right, what else? I did give you, again, I did not get you a pullback off of the daily chart recently because it didn't pull back enough, but I did find you some stuff on the 30-minute chart, and guess what? We've met targets. And again, this goes on forever, but I mean, we have this main target there. We had these other targets were already met, but you can also say, well, there's a new target off of this swing too. Ah, there it is. Okay, so some resistance here, some resistance here. If you were long, I would have you trail up your stops in gold, even though we could even go towards 59.54. Okay, but let's see what it does with this resistance. We could melt through it. I don't know. We'll see. And again, I can only tell you what I know versus what I don't know. And what I know is setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. All right, how about, silver? Of course, my weekly stuff held up beautifully. And didn't have an issue with the way the weekly chart looked. But initially, I had an issue with the fact that after this pullback, the 513 was not on the correct side. Well, that has all changed. Okay, we're back above. We have all the averages on the side of the bulls. We're above the 200, above the 50, the 5 and 13, crossed back to the upside. We seem to be making some higher targets. And in the bigger picture, the potential is to 138.46. Okay. And there are times where, we've had swings like this and I said, this is a target and people think I'm crazy. And then we eventually get there, but we don't always. So that's why we do trail up stops. We do, watch the other resistance decisions on the way up. I could be wrong about the pattern. There might be something in Elliott wave that I don't see. But that's why I'm also giving you these levels and suggesting that you trail up stops as you go, especially when you move into resistance. Then we have crude oil. So I decided to go ahead and do some crude timing. So I did find outright cycles the 2nd through the 5th. So that's early next week. But with a little bit more of a focus on the 4th through the 5th. Why? Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cycles between the 4th and 5th. Okay, so if we're trading higher into that, that would be a time where I would say, well, we better be careful, trail up stops on longs, because the timing could get this market to pull back. Plus the price resistance, 67.99 to 68.50. The fact that we're extending prior swings, 69.12 to 55. Another decision. Now I also went ahead and did timing off of this low. Okay, projected it. This only has 1 bar up. That's why I didn't do it from there. Now, I tend to think that this is more accurate in this case than the cycles off of this one. But once we get at least 3 days off of here, I'll also be running the timing, from there to look for the next possible high. So if you're long crude oil, guess what? You're closer to resistance. You're close to timing. Please protect profits on longs. And I also had given you a setup yesterday that ended up holding. I posted both of those charts today to show you the prior setup, and then I gave you a new one. And so far, the new zone is holding the 65.97 to 66.13. If we continue to hold above here, my first meaningful target is 68.29, and then 68.88. And of course, I could be wrong, so maybe you have a stop right underneath here. And TLT. Here, we've met two targets off of this pullback. And again, this wasn't a perfect hit, but the high end of the support was 88.85. The actual low was 88.93. Honestly, that's absolutely close enough, for a trade entry. Now, I was looking at it for myself, and then I saw it far away. I didn't realize how close it actually was. So I missed that one personally. But I also have time resistance early next week. Second, third is the first standout with the histogram as we're meeting extension targets. Market could just blow through it and go to the next higher levels because we have absolutely shifted gears here with price above the 200, above the 50, 5 and 13 cross back to the upside. And you know that ever since this happened, I told you we're going to look at the next pullback. So hopefully, and this was a counter trend trade with time and price. This is more difficult to, look at because you've got a lot against you. But we did have time, we did have price, we did have defined risk. So again, it's all about your trading personality as far as how you want to use this work. Sorry it was so long today, but I guess I had a lot to say and I hope it helps. If it doesn't, if you want to stick to the shorter format, I'll do that too. It's just that I wanted to explain a bit more. I know that we have, trials from the expo and stuff like that. And I'm not sure, I think you can still private message me on the site, but I'm not sure if you can speak in the trading room yet. So anyway, just let us know if you have any questions and have a great weekend. See you for Sunday night charts or Monday morning.